Good morning, students. Today we are dealing with last part of this module on integrated water resource management. The outline of today's class goes like this: a revision of previous class, step 3 to step 10 of IWRM process, types and forms of private sector involvement. Let us revise the previous class. For developmental objectives, the goal has to be set and action plan to be made with the involvement of stakeholders, and it is to be done with constitutional level, organizational level or so. We also discussed elements of an integrated water legislation framework and first two steps of IWRM process which was dealt, wherein present scenario of water resources and important aspects are dealt with respect to management. That is in step 1. And in step 2, stakeholder selection which was done including water users, water policy makers, water service providers, which all are involved in water consumable as well as non-consumables. This is all about the previous class. Step 3. Stakeholders interview. Experts carry out an elaborate procedure of interviewing the selected stakeholders, applying the guidelines for interviews. These guidelines are in the format of a questionnaire, which contains questions relating to the stakeholders interviewed and their perception of the existing situation and what they consider to be the desired IWRM situation. During this interview, previously overlooked stakeholders can be identified through the identification of parties that negatively influence the implementation of the stakeholders' duties. And a different set of questions under the issues in the matrix is used for all three functional levels. They are organized under the headings of stakeholders, awareness, policy, legal framework, institutional framework, financial agreements, human resource development, management information systems and decision support system. Wherein second part of the interview aimed to obtain a description of the stakeholders concept for improvement of the existing water resource situation, which is towards more integrated water resource management, and the following aspects and principles should be included in that. That is equitable and socially acceptable water distribution, efficient and economically sustainable water use, delegation, decentralization and other devolutions of authority, integrated planning, participation of stakeholders, private sector participation, environmental protection. This is all about step 3. And in step 4, analysis of stakeholders' opinions is done. The outcome of all the interviews will be collected and an inventory will be made of agreements which will be between the different stakeholders on the present situation, the problems and constraints and the steps to be taken to come to a better water management. The results of these interviews are described in a report. These stakeholders should also be invited to the workshop that follow in the process. This is all about step 4, wherein analysis of stakeholders' opinion will be done. Next, the workshop will be arranged for identification of the problem. It is important that all the relevant stakeholders recognize their problem and those of the others. Hence, the first workshop to which all the relevant stakeholders are invited to deal with the assessment of the existing water resource management situation and problem identification according to the perception of the stakeholders. Second, the purpose of the first workshop is to obtain common understanding between all different stakeholders of what the real problem and which should be addressed. The analysis report, which is formulated in the analysis of step 4, will be used as a reference and will be improved in accordance with the outcome of the workshop. Nextly, the agreed set of problems by the stakeholders will then be used as an input for the further stages on formulation of the desired IWRM situation and necessary interventions. End result of this workshop should be a selection of a very fruitful method to arrive at a set of most important problems. Where in step 6, there will be conduction of second workshop which will be on formulation of desired IWRM situation and intervention. The second workshop is organized or scheduled 1 or 3 months after a first workshop. It will elaborate extensively on the principles of integrated water resource management, and it will further result in the formulation of a desired water resource management situation. In that specific river basin and set of intervention that will be needed to achieve that. This workshop outcome provides directions for constitutional, organizational, and operational interventions. The outcome should be seen as an input for national policy and decision makers. This is all about step 6, wherein second workshop will be organized. In step 7, there will be a preliminary sub-basin report which will be based on the foregoing steps. The experts will draft a preliminary country document comprising of assessment of existing water management situation, complete problem inventory, desired water resource management situation, and proposed set of general and specific interventions needed to reach the desired situations. Step 8. The draft country or basin or sub-basin report is disseminated, and a thorough procedure for collecting comments from the different stakeholders at different level is followed in step 8. Wherein step 9, final country basin report is drafted. That is, experts draft a final sub-basin or basin report which is offered to the government and financing agencies for endorsement and inclusion into the strategy in specific water related projects for the specific country. And in 10th, they monitor the procedure, which is the final step of IWRM process. A monitoring procedure is developed to see whether the interventions are taking place and whether the envisaged results are achieved or no. This is all about step 1 to step 10, which addresses the IWRM process. The last part of this module is types and forms of private sector involvement. The private sector is morally bound to invest in environmental protection as a response to regulation, legislation, and specific incentives. The private sector plays an important role in financing water resource management through investments in service delivery, in water supply, as well as in sanitation. The motives for growing involvement of the large and international private sector are: when we consider financial, government passes on the cost and work of raising funds. And when we think of expertise, private companies, if large or international, bring essential known how in some technical and economical fields can be taken place. And when we come to risk sharing, private companies are typically more willing to take large risks than the public authorities. This is all about the private sectors, and the main types of private involvement in water service provision are found. First is full divestiture, that is transfer of all public assets through sales, in which case the private sector obtains full responsibility of the water supply network facilities and operations. This is full divestiture given to the private sector. And when we consider joint ventures, partial transfer of assets through the share sales, resulting in shared ownership and operating responsibilities between private sector and public. I mean, both will be responsible, private as well as public. Concession. Assets remain in public ownership, but use of the system to buy private sector for the duration of 20 to 25 days. Thus, these all three are the part of services provision. The main part comes to boots, that is build, operate, own, and transfer. Private sectors, what they can do is they can build a system, they can operate a system, they can own a system. Later on, it can be transferred to a public. Even sometimes it operates with BOO, that is build, operate, and own. Yes, when we talk about build, operate, and own, schemes were contracts for the construction of particular infrastructure project which is required and where ownership is handed to a public organization after a specified number of years. In the BOO case, ownership remains in the hands of the private sector. wherein sometimes it is led to leasing. That is, the water system remains in public ownership, but it is taken as lease to the private operators. Sometimes it works out with the contracting out. The least controversial form of private sector involvement is a water undertaking subcontracts certain functions to private firms, example meter reading, even when water services are provided by the private sector. I mean, contracting out only for meter reading. Water meter reading is given to the private. Rest all is managed by the public. But in private, the government still has a key role in providing a clear regulatory framework and ensuring that the poor and served and users are protected from excessive cost. This is all about involvement of the private sector. This completes the module. Thank you, students. For any queries, you just can ask me to repeat the class. Thank you.